Good afternoon, everyone. It's after lunch, so the food's digesting. People are kind of calming down as the itis sets in. And I've been leading technical teams for over 20 years. And then I realized a few years ago that a lot of my leadership style comes from my childhood. Because I've always loved heroes. As a kid, I spent countless hours and days reading comic books and fantasy and sci-fi novels and playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I didn't know at the time, but I had a draw toward heroes and their stories. But I really didn't understand this draw until I went to college. And that's when I discovered a book by a man named Joseph Campbell called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And the summary from this book, which is fairly popular, was written by Joseph Campbell, and it states this: a hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. Now, what does that mean? Now, didn't know at the time again, but Campbell's book will become a model for how I would develop a key aspect of my leadership style and how I led technical teams. But this style evolved over time. Now, there are a few variations of Campbell's model, but I'll use the one by Christopher Vogler. And not every story about heroes has every stage, and some writers choose to skip certain stages, and some may rearrange them, but the basic theme is there. Now, remember, the hero's journey spans two worlds. There's the common world where we all live in, and then there is the supernatural world where the magic happens. And there are four parts to the hero's journey. There's the call to adventure, the going through extreme trials, going through a transformation as an outcome of going through those trials, and then finally, the road back. And to summarize how this works, a hero is in the ordinary world, and she receives a call to some adventure. And there's usually some initial refusal to take on that call, and maybe fear or obligations in the ordinary world that prevent her from going out. But eventually, the hero will meet a mentor, and this mentor often gives the hero both wisdom and gifts to help her on her journey. And this hero is then emboldened to make the crossing, encounter trials that have to be overcome to level up to get ready to approach a final ordeal, the boss level for people who have played games. After the ordeal is finally solved or conquered, there's a reward, some great trophy, maybe a sword or the Fountain of Youth or some great reward. And then the hero begins the long road back home where they have to atone or resolve the conflicts that existed in the ordinary world before the adventure began, and then return to improve the ordinary world by using the boon that was bestowed. And I think that there are some reasons why I really like this cycle. And that's because I've seen my own journey through code follow this path, where I began coding when I was in high school on my Commodore 64, learning BASIC. Then I went to college, and then I encountered the thing that almost made me refuse to pursue a career in code, and that's that is Data Structures in C, which was a book that almost took me out. I was this close to being a pre-med major, because I thought, man, surely the human body is easier than this merciless compiler. But I persisted, and I got my degree, and I began going through the world of code. And I realized that as I journeyed through this world, I gained certain gifts or certain boons. Being a coder requires very structured, logical thinking. And I brought that back to the real world. And in my leadership style, I use a lot of what I've learned about coding to be a better leader. Now, there's a certain part of this journey that I found to be fascinating, and I realized that this was really what drew me to Campbell's cycle. And that is the mentor-hero portion of Campbell's journey. So the hero finds a mentor who enables her to find her path on the journey. And I realized that a mentor is simply someone who has accomplished or completed the hero's journey and was helping someone starting their own hero's journey. And so I began to see the link between the journeyer and the journey guide, which is, after all, what a tech lead does. All tech lead is someone who guides other people to follow a path that they themselves have traveled. But I really didn't understand, why would a new hero follow an experienced hero? Now, one of the most popular myths of our time is, of course, Star Wars. And Lucas has been very candid about the fact that he used Campbell's model of the hero's journey in writing Star Wars. And we see this mentor-hero-mentor cycle working, where Qui-Gon mentored Ben, who became a hero, and eventually mentored Luke, who became a hero, who eventually mentored Rey. So you see this passing of the baton. And the cycle seemed really interesting, but there was a problem. It apparently involved passing around a lightsaber, and I didn't have a lot of those on hand. And so while I could appreciate the Jedi model of leadership, I needed more rigorous study to understand how I could become a more effective technical leader. And so after I started my career, I began reading books. And there was a book that really resonated with me, and that is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John C. Maxwell. And there's obviously 21 laws, but there's really one key description that really helped me see the essence of leadership, and that's this: the law of influence. Leadership, the true measure of leadership, is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And then Maxwell went on to distinguish between leaders who led simply based on their titles. Hey, my title is tech lead, then you should follow me. You should do what I say. Versus leaders who lead based on influence. These were the type of leaders who were able to get buy-in from the people who follow them. And I realized, okay, this confirms that influence is really, really powerful. And if I could somehow improve my ability to influence my job and the people I work with, then I will become a better leader. But I was wondering, are there valid aspects of leadership? Are there other ways of leading teams? And it's true, there are many other ways of leading teams. And James McGregor Burns wrote a book called Leadership that came out in the 70s. And he presented the idea of the transactional leader versus the transformational leader. And Burns described the dichotomy this way: a transactional leader is someone who uses rewards and punishments as the basis for motivating people who follow her. We've all had, I'm sure, those types of managers where it's the carrot and stick approach. If you do what I tell you to do, I'll give you a reward. If you don't, then I'll take something away from you. And there's actually some merit to this transactional model of leadership. But then I read about the transformational model of leadership, and that works this way. Transformational leadership is a style in which the leader uses, I would say, her charisma and enthusiasm to influence her followers. And there's influence again. The same influence that Maxwell wrote about was being magnified by Burns. And so I knew that I needed to use influence in my day-to-day work if I was going to become a really effective leader of technical teams. Now, a few years ago, my team I was working with began to use the idea of code smells. Have anyone heard of code smells? Yeah, you guys have heard about that. And so these are just basic, quick tests of whether code has some issue with it. It may not always be a bug or something that's going to cause a crash, but it's something that may cause a problem down the road. That could make the code harder to maintain or eventually affect the performance of code. And there's lots of different code smells, and they vary by what you're coding in, what language you're using, what team you're working with. And some basic ones are, okay, is this code duplicated in different parts of the code base? Or does this call have too many parameters? Or is this an overly large class? And as I began to think about influence in leadership, I was wondering, are there influence smells? Are there simple things I can use to gauge my leadership and how it was working out? And I realized that there was a way to do this. And ironically, I found this way by walking to a meeting. It was in 2004, I was working with a technical team, doing support and small releases for a company, and my team lead came in and said, we're doing this meeting, but we're going to stand up. It's like, okay. So we all stood in a circle and gave our updates. And I like, this is great. The meeting's short, because people don't like to stand up for a long time, and I hate long meetings, and so I thought this is really cool. And I realized that this was a practice from a method called Scrum. And for a long time, I thought that Scrum was simply standing up in meetings, which is a common misconception. I realized that Scrum was part of something bigger, that Scrum was tied to a set of values that I found to be really, really powerful. And I eventually became a certified Scrum Master and began to pull and to prod the values that are behind Scrum. But before we get to that, we really have to go into the revolution that started the Agile movement. And Agile, unfortunately, like a lot of terms, has become marketing material. But there's actually real history behind the Agile Manifesto. And there's actually real power. And this started back in a snow lodge in Utah called Snowbird. And 17 people got together to discuss, are there better ways to build software? And these people had come from different disciplines and different ways to try to make software development better. Some had tried extreme programming, also called XP. Some had done Scrum. Some had done feature-driven design, and all these different ways for making software better. And they had a lot of disagreements. There was a lot of tension and robust debates, but they realized that they had a set of shared principles and a set of shared values. And so they knew that the heavy documentation and the contract-driven methods of waterfall really weren't working. You usually got software that was really expensive to build that no one wanted to use. And so they saw that over and over again. And so they took their disagreements, put them aside, and they found a set of values that they can all agree to follow. And I'm going to go through the manifesto briefly, but we're going to dive into the values one by one and extract leadership lessons from each one. But I just want to make sure that we understand a few points. And most people skip this part of the manifesto if they bother to actually read it, and that is we are uncovering better ways of developing software. This is something that you do on an ongoing basis. These people weren't saying that we've found the final solution for building code. They knew that they were part of an ongoing progression of building code. And if you're involved in building software, then you're also part of this ongoing ways of uncovering better ways to build software. And I hope that as you build your software, that you're not just writing the code and shipping it to customers, but you're interrogating how you're doing it, and that you join this drive to improve software development. And the next part goes into the values. And so through the work of trying to figure out better ways to develop software, they found 4 values. And the first value is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. The second one is working software over comprehensive documentation. Thirdly, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And then the fourthly and finally, responding to change over following a plan. And just like most people forget the first part of the manifesto, they also forget the last part. And that's this: there is value in the items on the right, but the items on the left are simply valued more. And remember, that doesn't mean that the values on the right don't have any value. It just means that we don't focus on them in our drive to make better software. So the first Agile value that I want to distill a leadership lesson from is individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this is a great way to build your team influence. Now, how does this work? Now, the reasons that Agile values individuals and interactions over processes and tools is that processes and tools don't build software. You need people to do that. And not just people, you need people who are highly motivated and who enjoy working with each other. And there's been a lot of ways to optimize the interactions of people in software over the years, and People have tried having foosball tables and pool tables in the break room and having open floor plans where everyone can see everyone else, and lots of alcohol in the corner somewhere that you can partake of if you're so inclined. And almost every one of these is ineffective in a lot of ways. But there's been a lot of great work in really documenting how can you keep a software development team motivated. Daniel Peek, described autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And Dan Aurelio talked about the importance of giving credit and recognizing the contributions of others. But I found one simple, time-tested way to motivate my team, and that is the simple idea of preserve dignity at all costs. Preserve dignity at all costs. And it's easy to dignify allies or people who agree with you. But this lesson requires you to also dignify people who you don't like, people who disagree with you, even people who violently disagree with you. You can disagree, but still maintain dignity. And I found that by honoring the dignity of everyone on my team, I have consistently built my team influence. So let me give you an example. I recently joined a new company, and I decided to implement a tool called Slack. Does anyone use Slack? All right, everyone use Slack. All right. And the company was using a tool that I didn't like, and honestly, I didn't like it because it wasn't Slack. And so I implemented the tool, and eventually more and more people came into my Slack team, and I got excited because I saw people coming in and joining the channels and more discussions happening. But eventually, a coworker came to my desk and shared a concern that she had about what was going on in my Slack team. And she referenced a joke that someone had made about bacon. Now, who doesn't love bacon? I love bacon. I have a bacon wrapped in a little towel in my backpack from this morning because I want to eat it later. I really like bacon. And so I was like, well, it was just a joke, and I initially brushed her off. But she's from Malaysia, which has a strong Muslim population. And in that part of the world, even joking about bacon or any pork product could be very, very insensitive. And she explained that as more people come into our Slack team, our company Slack team, then they may be offended if I don't find some way to moderate the behavior. And so even though my initial thought was, hey, it's just Slack, let it go, Slack is fun, we're building the secret language of emojis and Giphy animations, that was brilliant. But then I realized that even though from an org chart perspective, I outranked this person, even though she had worked there longer than I had, I remembered individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And I realized that even a tool like Slack can affect your company culture. And I said, you know what, you're right. We want to have an inclusive and welcoming company anywhere that our people interact, including our Slack channel. And so very soon, I just pinned a comment to the general channel saying, hey, guys, let's be respectful of other people's cultures and values. And Coraline, who is very active on Twitter, who's a brilliant technologist, published a set of community guidelines that if you Google Coraline and guidelines, you'll find them. And I pinned those guidelines also to that channel to let people know that, hey, we want to have our Slack channel be a space where every individual felt respected. And so I saw a slight dip in activity because, I get the weekly email from Slack about your team, and I read it through it and see what's going on. And so even though I lost a little bit of what I liked in Slack, I gained so much more. This colleague became someone that I worked on multiple projects with, and she became an advocate for me in the company because I was relatively new, but she had formed relationships not only at her level but above. And so I gained a great ally in the company. And that taught me that dignity always outranks the chain of command. Dignity always does better than any toy or perk that you plant around the office. Now, the second Agile value is working software over comprehensive documentation. Now, this does not mean that we don't write documentation. So everyone thinks that, hey, we're doing Agile, no more documentation. Birgitta, we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but this is really a value that is against excessive documentation. And that means that we don't do what I did back in the 90s and early 2000s, where I spent countless hours writing documentation. And guess what? This documentation was almost never read. And it was almost always out of date because the software would change, but we wouldn't update the documentation. Or even the screenshots got out of date because we made changes to the UI. And so it means that we don't discard documentation, but we document only as much as we actually need for the user. And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, we need to cover everything the customer can possibly do with our software. But do you know the best way to find out what a customer wants to know about your software? Ship it. Give it to them. And then by analyzing the results, you'll find out what they need to know. And in Scrum, we actually, my team includes in our definition of done, update documentation, so that before the end of each sprint, our document is up to date. Now, I eventually took this lesson about getting things working, right? Don't worry about perfection, focus on working software. And by focusing on getting things working instead of things like documentation or excessive documentation, I found that I began to grow my build influence. And that's my influence over how we build software, which leads us to my second leadership lesson, which is working always ships faster than perfect. And when I say this, I mean that you can always wait to make software better, but software is never really done. So if you wait until the software is perfect, then you're never going to ship it. But as tech leads, you're going to build more than just software. And so this principle also applies to anything that in your role you're asked to do. And this leadership lesson applies in a wide variety of contexts. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was working for a global company. And so we had offices all over the world. And so I was based in the US. But one of our European offices had a customer in China. And this was also during a time when our data centers were hit by a DDoS attack, which basically brought our system to its knees. And this wasn't a problem in America, in my time zone, or even in Europe, because this was really late at night for us. But the customers in China and in Singapore were affected. In fact, when they walked into work, they found that the system was not responsive. And so my European counterpart found out that I had a partner or a resource who worked in India, which is several time zones closer to China in that area. And so we began to talk about, well, this person is allocated to me. Can we find a way for this person to provide support for my European colleague? And so we drew all these org charts and we drew time zone maps and try to figure out, well, when daylight saving time is in effect this, or when it's not that, and, oh, well, what about all the holidays, the Indian holidays? And eventually, I said, let's not make this perfect, guys. We know roughly what this person is going to have to do. Let's just give it a try. Let's give it a try for a month and then see what happens, observe the behavior, and then we'll improve it. And the outcome is that we didn't receive any calls for that first month. And over the next year, we only received 3 or 4. And so by saving time, by focusing on working, getting things working, I was able to really vet out this solution. And so getting something working is a great way to figure out how it should be used. Now, the third value from the Agile Manifesto is customer collaboration. And this does not mean that we don't have contracts. I write statements of work all the time that are often tied to our global contract and our operating agreements with our clients. But in Agile, we don't focus on contracts as the primary vehicle for how we relate to our customers. So what does that mean? That means that customers trust colleagues, not contracts. And just like very few users read your documentation, you'll be very surprised that very few of the people that you work with actually read contracts. And I've seen this over and over again. And I found that treating customers like colleagues instead of written agreements that you have to execute, that leads to better outcomes and that's helped me build my customer influence. Now, the example that I can give you about that is that I was working on a team where management had inked a partnership with another software company. And part of this partnership meant that we had to build an integration between our two platforms. And so I had seen in previous companies this fail when these two companies worked in silos, right? Where they built their solution for several weeks, and then we built our solution for several weeks in parallel, and then we just hoped that when it all came together, that would work. And I've seen that fail over and over again. So I was like, okay, we have this contract for how we should work. Let's put that to the side, and let's work like colleagues. And so I made one Scrum team that was spread across two companies. So we had the same daily stand-ups, we did the same sprint planning, we had the same single source of truth for tracking the work, and we ended up actually shipping early, way early than expected. So I found that by treating my customer like a colleague instead of contract, I was able to get better results. Now, I do want to give you guys some real talk, so just kind of lean in a little bit, because this is really important. Not all customers are your friends. There are toxic customers. I've had more than my share. There are customers that will try you. There are customers that will try to take advantage of you. I hope it's rare, and in my experience, it's been rare, but there are customers that you always have to check. And this is real talk, and that's why we come to the lead dev, right? For real talk. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a customer is to let them go. To say, you know what, I'm going to refund you your money, revoke your licenses, and we can end this relationship right now. And often that will actually change the behavior, but there are some times when it's just let them go. The opportunity cost of dealing with toxic customers is so high because every hour you spend with a toxic customer is an hour not spent with an actually good customer who treats you with respect and dignity. So that's free. So responding to change over following a plan. Now, again, this does not mean that we don't plan. A lot of people feel that when you do Agile, we don't plan anymore. That's not true. In Scrum, we have an event called sprint planning that is baked into Scrum. But we do realize that the future is notoriously difficult to predict. And that means that we recognize that. So instead of making a long, drawn-out, multi-month, multi-year plan, we just break time into smaller slices. And then we agree on what should be done in that slice, and then we try to get it done. And then after that, we look at the results. Now, as I began to look at this Agile value, I realized that we shouldn't fear surprises, we should fear inflexibility. And I used this to solve a lot of problems in my career, where I was given a task, and I always baked in flexibility into how I accomplished that task. I made sure that I always built time to iterate and then improve. And by doing that, I got better results, and I improved my schedule influence. Now, these are the values from the Agile Manifesto, and these are the lessons that we can get from them. Preserve dignity at all costs, working always ships faster than perfect, customers trust colleagues, not contracts, and don't fear surprises, fear inflexibility. And I hope that as you go throughout your journey as a technical lead, no matter where you are on it, that you realize that by optimizing your influence with people, your build, and your customers, and the schedule, that's how you maximize your effectiveness and move you from a transactional to a transformational leader. And when in doubt, you'll find a really good set of instincts in the Agile Manifesto. Thank you.